What is the divine human era?
We all came here with a soul, with the purpose of discovering what that is. We are fed through many of the systems here a lot of lies about who we actually are, that we're not powerful, that we need a guru or a figurehead or someone to find God through.
A population that realizes that they're interdimensional, that they're extrasensory. I mean, that's a hard population to control. The lies just can't land once you're in connection with Source.
It's about being free in your body, fully embodied in our divinity, which means that we fully feel ourselves, which means we stop numbing. Activity really can be a numbing activity if you take it to that extreme.
If you had any idea of how much fun you're having in this experience, why would you want to rush it? Welcome to Soul Pod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. Welcome back, light beings, to another episode of Soul Podcast. Crystal here, your guide. And I'm joined today by a very exciting guest, Corissa Saint Laurent. She is a guide for the divine human era, and we're going to talk about what that is. And she works with strategic CEOs and founders, helping them to find their next level. Welcome, Corissa.
Thank you, Crystal. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, so why don't we start with that? What is the divine human era?
I define it as the era in which we as humans step into our truth as divine beings, that we all came here with a soul on a mission, with the purpose of discovering what that is, going through the lessons that we came here to learn, and then giving our gifts back to humanity, to this planet, to our celestial friends, the entire universe, as we vibrate into our truth, which is our own unique frequencies. We then get to bring our best self forward. Our true self is our best self. And, we talk a lot about in the human languaging around like, oh, live your best life. And, oh, let's live, our dreams. And these are things that can sound somewhat empty until you actually step into it, I believe, from the spiritual frequency. Because living your best life could be, mimosas at brunch on the weekends for some people, right?
We've all been there.
Yeah, I've been there. I lived that version. What I'm talking about is living into this best life of being in full alignment with our divinity, the cleaving off that happened from the divine source and landed us here, gave us a mission. And that mission is something that can be so quiet in ourselves that it is simply that you're meant to be able to speak your truth in this lifetime. Maybe it's that you're meant to build a company that's going to impact millions of people. Maybe it's that you're meant to raise a family and do this incredible job of ushering in life and rearing those children. Whatever the mission is, big, small, they're all big. They're all big.
They're all big because it's your mission.
Exactly. And it comes from the divine source. So stepping into the divine human era is that we are understanding that we are living into that truth. And with that comes a lot of different ways of living. We mentioned, of course, the mimosa weekends. It's something different than that. It's a vibration and a frequency that's not necessarily what we were taught here in this earth school, but it's what we can remember to be when we really step into this era.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's a challenging time for so many of us as we step into this new era, because it really does feel like a new era. It feels like we're a lot of times in my meditations, I see this metaphor of the wet rag getting wrung out and all the water coming out, all the dirty water, and something new can emerge from that. But I'm curious, to be able to step into this new era, I'm curious what you think about what we're shedding as individuals, as a collective, to be able to step into that divinity, to step into that connection with Source.
First thing that's coming up very loudly is lies. So what I mean by that is we are fed through many of the systems here within our societies a lot of lies about who we actually are, that we're not powerful, that we don't have psychic abilities or extrasensory abilities, that we need a guru or a figurehead or someone to find God through. We're fed so many of these lies that become our truths because they get embedded in our belief system, and they're so pervasive that they seem like, oh, that is just the norm. So many of the things that are, I believe, are truth get demonized and occulted and are in this underground
Woo-woo.
space. Yeah, right. They're stigmatized. They're made fun of by saying things like, oh, it's so woo-woo, or to the degree of, our ancestors and witches that were burned. I mean, you are persecuted for living these ways, having these beliefs, connecting personally and individually to your divine nature, rather than going through the prescribed pathways that were given to you. And those pathways come with a lot of controls. Those controls are designed to keep humans in line and in service to the system that is giving you those rules. So the lies are all embedded in society, embedded in our systems, embedded in all of the programming that comes through most of the ways. I mean, I can't speak for everybody listening to your podcast, but I would say most of us that were raised in the Western world, we were raised with very specific programs, and those were guiding us in very specific ways and directions to live a certain life, a life that was one that could be acceptable to your fellow humans. So what does it mean to have psychic abilities in this prescribed Western, clean, sanitized life? Well, it means you might be labeled schizophrenic because you are actually tapped in and pulling in information that is coming from multiple sources, which can be overwhelming if you're not guided. So we've lost the truth. We've lost the systems that have guided those truths. And many of those teachers and teachings had to go underground. So what I'm excited about for this divine human era is that so many of those teachers and teachings are coming out of the woodwork. They're coming out of the
Re-emerging.
caves. Yes. So we are living in a time, which is the exciting part of this time, where these things are becoming less woo-woo, less stigmatized, more talked about even, and therefore slowly becoming more acceptable. And that's the beautiful, great side. And what comes with it as these things emerge in their strength and power is a ton of chaos and breakdown and shit show on the other side, which we're also experiencing.
We're also experiencing. Yeah, so much I want to double click on there that you said. That lie, I think one of the biggest ones is that lie about how powerful we are. Because a population that realizes that they're interdimensional, that they're extrasensory, I mean, that's a hard population to control, because the lies just can't land once you're in connection with Source, with your highest self. And so do you think that's why we're seeing the chaos, is slowly more people are having that realization of their of that capacity?
I don't know if the chicken and egg scenario is exactly that. I believe that these things are happening simultaneously, that we've got the chaotic breakdown of certain systems, and then therefore those who want to uphold those are fighting tooth and nail to keep the control, keep the hold on those legacy systems. And part of that is caused by the awakening of certain individuals and people that are out there speaking and talking and then teaching and therefore influencing others. But then that's also influencing more people to awake, but also influencing more of that chaotic breakdown. So it is really a pendulum, it's balance always going on. Right now, I feel like our seesaw, if you will, is steep. It's like this crazy freaking ride.
Yeah.
You're like, and then as you plummet into this chaotic feeling. If you get drawn there and you get pulled there, it can feel like you're going down, the steepest roller coaster. But then as you climb, it's like, oh my God, this is the most incredible height I've ever experienced and reached and felt. The expansion is massive. So those swings, I feel, are really severe right now, but they balance each other. Everything here is always in balance. It just looks like they're opposites fighting each other all the time, but they're actually always balancing each other out all the time. And in that sense,
I love that.
Very friendly. Yeah. They're benevolent to each other. They're not enemies to each other. They're just fighting for their own beingness, and they're fighting for their own way in the world. And that looks like division, but to me, it's just a part of the harmonizing.
I love that. That's such a good point to make. That as you awaken and can see more, and you have this higher precipice, and like you're saying, these heights of experience and consciousness that you can access, then it makes sense then that you become more aware of the other side of things, the other side of the gradient, the other side of the seesaw. And that as a whole, that there is this container for both to exist. Just so interesting. It's like the yin and the yang.
Exactly.
There's always balance. Karma is just a balance sheet.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. And for people who are curious about stepping into this divine human era consciously and intentionally, rather than kind of stumbling into it, what can they do? What do you think are some of the primary, not just modalities, but ways of being that belong to the past and the new ways of being that are being welcomed?
So much of the new ways of being in this divine human era are the old ways of being. And it's a return. I believe it's a return, and it's a remembrance of who we actually are. And a lot of that comes into us understanding and being in our fullness of ourselves, being embodied within our humanness. So it's the divine human. It's not the spiritual light body that exists here. A lot of spirituality of the past, of the last era, is about leaving the body. It's about ascension. You get to nirvana. You get to that ascended place where you are free of the human constructs and you're free of your body. I believe, and this is a divine and characteristic of the divine human era, that it's about being free in your body. Being here, fully embodied in our divinity, which means that we fully feel ourselves, which means we stop numbing ourselves. And there's countless ways to do that. The most common, of course, are alcohol and drugs, media consumption, anything activity really can be a numbing activity if you take it to that extreme, to where it is a diversion from you being in your own presence. So many people are, and this is a good test for people, is if you can sit with yourself peacefully, whether that's it. And I think it's good to do this in public, because when you've got public around you and public eyes, it can feel even more disturbing to do this. When you're home and you're in your own quiet space, it's a lot easier, of course, because you are alone. But be in the presence of others, but be fully embodied in your own presence, sitting at a cafe, not listening to a podcast, not reading a book, not talking with somebody else, just sitting there. Do it in a park, do it in the office, do it somewhere, and see how long it takes for you to get uncomfortable. The time in which it takes is really telling of how comfortable we are within our own skin. And I don't mean in our ego skin of like, oh, I like the way I look and how smart I am or what I've achieved and accomplished. It's about being in that simple presence of yourself. And the longer you can do that, the more you know that you are settling into this home. This earth is our home. It's an incredible place to be, and so many amazing things can happen here, and we can step into our full power here while doing it. But getting rid of or reducing those diversions are extremely important, because there's so much around that can distract us from that simple presence with ourselves. Doing that, getting good at that, by being very good is just getting comfortable with it to where it feels like second nature. I could just sit here and not feel like a total weirdo. I'm just sitting here by myself in this space with, everyone else around. And again, this is without the earpods, without the other things. So that's one very big thing, and it's not easy to do. It'll be interesting, I think, if you try this as an exercise, to time yourself first and to see actually how many seconds or minutes that you can get to before you start getting antsy and wanting to pick up your phone, wanting to start a conversation with the person next to you, wanting to pick up that book or whatever it is. So our getting comfortable being in our own presence, really important, getting comfortable without diversions and distractions, getting into a state of our own grace. And that grace is when you enter into presence and stillness, that you can allow source to flow in. That's what I mean by grace, at least. And we can do that through practices. Absolutely. We can meditate and get there. We can do different types of breath work practices. We can get there. We can do plant medicines and get there. We can go on a long run and get there. The more I think we can get there, just simply in a beingness, in that stillness, the more real it becomes. The more it becomes your daily set point, rather than, okay, I want to get into that state. I have to go meditate for 30 minutes or an hour. I've got to go on that, run to get my endorphins going, and then I get there. And it's all just time. It takes time to settle into that being the norm and that being your baseline, rather than the baseline being where most of us operate now, which is very much up in our heads, in our brains.
Yes, I love that. I talk about this all the time, that there is no real hack to getting to that point where you're comfortable with yourself in that stillness, in that presence. And it's so simple, like what you're talking about is so powerful. Going somewhere, even if maybe start even in your home with like no devices, no TV, no book, and just sitting with yourself for however long you can. It's so interesting to me that, and I hear this a lot in meditation, is that, Crystal, I just can't sit still for that long.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting, really telling, and also I totally understand it because you're sitting with yourself, that relationship with self. So it seems like to me, walking into this divine human era is developing a deeper relationship with all elements of self, the ego, the higher self, the body, all of it, the emotional body, the spiritual experience. And it's so simple to start that. There is no big secret. It's just really that. And it's also a great reminder that the big things are the small things.
That's right.
That practice it seems very simple and very straightforward and very small, but it's also the big thing. It's the change that we're talking about. And when that starts to happen, when people start to access that expansive dimension of self, in the divine human era, it seems like it opens up so many more possibilities for individuals and for the collective, because you're starting to be able to choose from a higher perspective, right? So I'm curious, you talked about purpose and mission. And I know that people have a lot of questions about their purpose and mission. But they're very curious about, why am I here? What purpose do I have? How do I find it? How do I listen to it? And I know you work very deeply in that work. So I'm curious, in this age of chaos and a lot happening on the planet right now, this hyperconnectivity that we have now in the physical world, how can people connect with their purpose or their mission as they step into this divine human era?
I believe that the connectivity that you just mentioned with devices and technology is a reflection of the connectivity that we are gaining also through the multidimensional realms in that
I
stillness
totally
presence.
agree.
It's
Yeah.
insane, right? And so
Yeah.
I have really done a shift recently of not debasing technology in the way that I used to think of, it's going to be our downfall and our demise of our humanity. It's just a reflection. It's a reflection of the power of that connectivity, the power or the access to the kind of information and the depth of information that we have. And when we use both, then we're entering into superhuman dimension, into truly, I'm getting full tingles and shivers right now around this. We are going to be able to, and I think we are already able to tap into a depth and a breadth and that we've never even imagined possible. I think we've been there before. I don't think this is, this linear progression to now and woo, finally made it. It's this constant that exists in this earth plane of where we move in and out of these eras and these light times, dark times, or more light, more dark. It's never one or the other, right? It's always both. And so to your question around, and I've forgotten your question now because I went off on a tangent.
It was a great tangent. I like that tangent. I just before we move on, I felt those shivers too, because that's the realization that I came to as well, is that technology is not necessarily something to be pushed against. There's ways we mold it for sure, but that it is a reflection, it is a mirror, and it is an opportunity that's being presented to us that can carry us forward in some really powerful, beautiful ways. And as with anything, it can also have not so great outcomes as well. It's up to us to mold that, that we are these creators. So I think it's so important for people to remember that your awakening, your presence, that is your purpose, what you're bringing forward. You have so much more power than you think you do to shape these things and to shape your mission and the world that we're in.
That was your
But
question. The mission and purpose.
Yes, that was my question. Mission and purpose.
You brought it back.
There we go. We landed back there.
The work of focusing on mission and purpose is really just the beginning of asking the big questions, right? We all enter into this path of exploring the depths of self, all aspects of self, as you mentioned earlier, exploring beyond just the ego mind, which is just fed by a human system of rewards and punishments around that. So that's its own system, right? And that's the way that most people operate from when they start schooling and into an awakening. Some people, bless them, got to experience that from the very beginning of life. They were never tainted or maybe brought in or programmed into this system. But most of us living in the modern day were. And so the job then starts with that initial question. Who am I? What am I doing here? The big existential ones. And then those big questions lead us down the rabbit hole of finding the answers. This is the hero's journey. This is our purpose, I believe, here is to figure that out. So I don't believe purpose is actually, I think the purpose and mission get conflated quite often. I believe our purpose is to be fully aligned with our divine self and that truth. And the mission is more individualized. The soul mission for Crystal or for Corissa, maybe we have somewhat similar ones, but for somebody else, it could be, some of the things we were talking about earlier, if that it's to simply learn how to use your voice or simply learn how to take care of yourself. Maybe in a past incarnation that wasn't accomplished. So missions are very individualized. I believe purpose is life, the living of life in service to our soul, in service to the truth, and coming into full alignment and full remembrance of that. And helping people get there can be also a life's journey, because every single person's path, although they look similar, are their own. I cannot tell somebody what their mission is. Even if I say, and someone listens to this and says, okay, well, yeah, that resonates with me about purpose, that's my purpose. Even hearing it from me or you or anybody else does not make it so for that person. We all need to come into this understanding through the living. So get out there and live. Get out there and experience life. Experience the hardships. Experience the challenges. Experience the pain. Do not numb yourself away from all of those beautiful learning experiences and learning opportunities. Do hard things, and not because we're masochists and we are, because I did this hard thing that makes me stronger. No, because in that hard thing, we are exploring the depths of self. Through the challenging thing, we are seeing what the limits that we have around us, what limits were put on us by our parents, our community, our society, our world. We get then to test those limits. We push them out. Those limits then can be what maybe felt like was here. Now it's out into infinity. We only get to do that, though, when we go through the walk and we actually live it. We can't read about it in a book. We can't hear it on a podcast. We can't get it from a teacher and go, okay, now it's mine. We need to live it and actually embody it and go through the process of it. So I act as a guide for people in those processes, but I can't live their process for them, right? We all need to come to those understandings. And that's why it can seem like maybe you've had this experience before where you read a book when you were 20, and then you read it again when you were 40, and it's like you finally read it. You understand it. Finally, you see the truth in it, or something that someone said once, you heard it 1,000 times, but then this one time it hits. You're like, why? Because you lived the life between that first time and this time to get to a place of where you were opened and ready for that to land. And so in the living, we are opening and we are expanding and we are getting to essentially prime ourselves for all the lessons. And so that's what I believe our purpose is, to just fully live here and have an amazing time doing it. Amazing doesn't always have to be positive, right? We say, oh my God, it's so amazing. And it makes it sound like amazing is, this incredible positive thing. But amazing is something that amazes. And amazement and awe can be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
life.
just experience. Yeah, I totally agree. I was talking to somebody yesterday and I was talking about when I was in meditation, I was talking to my guides and I was a little frustrated. I was like, oh, I want this to happen faster, do this and that. And, how do I move through this quickly? And it was just so interesting. And my guides are so simple and clear. And like, if you had any idea, and of course, it's not really words, as you know, it's just like a knowing that comes in. But the gist of it was, if you had any idea of how much fun you're having in this experience, in figuring this out, in living, to your point, living the thing, doing the thing, like this is the highlight. Like this is the biggest show. Why would you want to rush it? And it really, for my human crystal side, was like, oh, wow, that's such a good point. Just enjoy the journey. Because as you're saying, it is about the experience. And it's very difficult from the human perspective to think, oh, that tough thing I went through, that near-death experience, that illness, that breakup, the job, thing, the relationship breaking down. But it's so juicy. There's something really, if you're experiencing it, and I deeply believe this, if you're experiencing it, it's life speaking to you. Mm-hmm. It's life co-creating with you. And that's why we're here. So I love your framing of purpose and mission as well. I want to double click on that because I 100% agree. I've always thought of my purpose as being soul realization. How much of my soul can I bring into this dimension of space and time? Yeah. Everything else is secondary. The mission, the specifics, what I create, what I want to do in this lifetime. But that, for me at least, that guiding North Star of that connection and that exploration of self is paramount and the most important to me. And it can be very unifying, right? If on some level, that's actually all of our purpose is soul realization, is realizing who it is that you really are, that connection with source. Yeah. Then you start to look at the world and the planet a little bit differently, right?
Mm-hmm. And you look at each other so differently, and there's so much less judgment around what someone's path is to get there. Even, within the spiritual world, there's so much judgment, and there's so much hierarchy.
There's so much. But let's talk about that. Why is there so much judgment in the spiritual community?
Because, we're still here in this earth plane. We're still held by the rules that are here, and we're still so much slaves to our ego. And until we make ego in service to us, in service to our divine self, our higher self, our soul, until that happens, then it's still in charge. And it's still working by those rules. Doesn't matter how many different robes you put on or how many retreats you've done or, whatever level.
Or how many certifications you have.
Yeah. So the greatest teachers in my life have been honestly the ones that are not in the spiritual realm. They are fully living life, and they give zero fucks to this human construct. And you get to see the freedom in that and go, wow, there's a whole new way of actually experiencing life through, I want that joy. I want that level of freedom in, not caring at all what anyone thinks. And I don't mean that we do things, that we get to this place, because we all are so interconnected. I don't mean that we get to this place of where we are not caring how we impact other people. And I mean that we don't care what other people think of us and then our beingness. We get to fully step into our truth that way. Most people I know that have gotten there are not the gurus. They aren't the spiritual leaders. They aren't the ones, writing the best-selling books. They are, living in villages. They're simple. The life looks very simple, and it is looks a lot different than, what's being sold to us in this new age era. It doesn't mean that someone wearing the robes and the feathers and the crystals is a bullshit artist at all. It doesn't mean that, because, that we can all don whatever robes we want. It is a frequency, and you feel it. And the more that you're in tune with your own, the more you can feel it in others. So I have a good friend of mine, actually, who does not look the part, let's say, right? Doesn't wear the things that would signify her as a spiritual leader, but she's probably one of the most powerful multidimensional channels and beings that I've come across here. But you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't expect it. And it's not that she's dressing or acting or living that way to try to trick people. And that's just her. That's her human her.
Authenticity.
It's her authenticity as her human self, which didn't have to. And granted, she probably did go through that era of, I've never even asked her that, if she went through her era of, having the identity. Right. And I've gone through so many of wearing these different identities to signify that, hey, I'm to be trusted in this identity. But I think the more that I've entered into my own truth and my own alignment, all of that, you see through the bullshit. You meet those people countless times and you interface with them and you go, oh yeah, this resonance is not there. It is not matching. It is not authentic. So they may feel like they're being more authentic because they're wearing this, but truly, they're actually truly not authentic to what they're speaking or acting in, because they're still reliant on those things being what identifies them as. Our energy signature is what identifies us as awakened, connected, aligned, attuned, whatever words we want to use. The energy that we give off is what is that marker. So for us, experiencing that, even if someone is a completely new student to the awakening and to their spiritual life and this multidimensional life, they can still feel it too. I think we just get better at feeling it the more we go. And actually, I know a woman who, I grew up in New Hampshire, very practical and pragmatic kind of place. There are not a lot of people in robes and feathers and, this kind of person roaming around. Absolutely not when I was growing up. Even in my early 20s when I was there and living as an adult, definitely not. maybe a little bit more now, but not so much. And I've lived on the West Coast long enough. That's where I felt at home. That's where my people were. And New England is very opposite in that way. And I know someone from my working life there then in my early 20s, late 20s. She's an attorney. She wears suits, very New England. And she reached out to me recently because she saw my content and she found my website and my podcast. And she was so excited because this is the secret life that she's been living in not necessarily with her family, not necessarily within her work, but with a select few people in her life. But she was so happy to feel this kinship in it. But she's not running out and, going and putting on new clothes, if you will. She's still herself. But when we had this conversation and she's describing things to me, she's so removed from this world that she doesn't have the words for it even. She doesn't have the languaging around.
Interesting.
She doesn't have the spiritual jargon, right? She doesn't have the metaphysical jargon. She didn't know how to explain, but she used her words and we're explaining things. And then I was sort of translating for her and I said, Linda, you are describing a channeling experience. You are fully bringing in multidimensional information. Did you know that? And this just happened countless times throughout our conversation. It was so fascinating because this is just something that she tapped into through trauma, through a tragedy. Her husband killed himself when she was in her 30s and had young children at home, and it just completely upended her world. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit if you're open to it, because trauma, tragedy can be a very powerful initiator to the
For
opening.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think also a lot of what you talked about there, and I hope all the listeners picked this up, is that really what we're talking about is authenticity. And I think that's going to be a huge component of this divine human era that you're talking about. Because when you have a relationship with the universe, the source, God, whatever you want to call it, but that unifying component of your consciousness of yourself, then authenticity is just emergent from that experience, from that connection. And so the ego is very wiry, and it doesn't love that because it becomes less and less front of store, if you will. and it is interesting that we're seeing quite a shift in the spiritual community, even as far as leadership and the guru position. And I have a very nuanced perspective on that. I think the guru as a portal, as an activator, as an initiator served a very powerful purpose, but it can also be easily, even for somebody who's spiritually developed, it can be a trap once you start receiving that power. And you have to be very conscious to not allow people to give their power over to you. And it's enticing. And I think that's what we've seen has happened quite a bit, especially in the male category. So that's just a little tidbit I wanted to throw in there. But yes, trauma, I know for me, the most intense traumatic experiences of my life were a massive portal. And I've talked about this with a few people. I'm curious what you think. On the one hand, I know they were a massive portal and it opened up so much. And I can't regret it because I wouldn't otherwise have understood certain things to the degree that I now understand them. And that's also not the only portal, right? Joy, bliss, that can be a portal as well to transformation. But yeah, I'm curious to hear what you think about that.
It is, and it can be. And I think that our insistence on needing to hit rock bottom in order to open is a reflection too of the collective, that we've been collectively traumatized. So it isn't just our own individual experiences, but think about movies. And even the movies that are designed for children, there's always a tragedy and a trauma. Bambi's mother dies. That is the way that movie starts. And you are
It's so traumatizing.
Yes. I mean, the woods are on fire. It's like, what? So much.
That movie messed me up as a kid.
Exactly. I mean, think of Wizard of Oz. I mean, there's so much fear instilled in that. And there's a lot of multi-layered experiential things going on in the Wizard of Oz. But movies and media, I believe, have been a way to collectively traumatize us and to normalize fear and violence to the point of where we get our set point for that, what is acceptable to us is set at a level to where our cortisol is spiking all the time. We are being stress-induced through just life and through watching the news and through watching a movie that you want to just relax with, but you're being stress-induced through it. And that is a very collective situation. And then we've got the real things outside of media that have happened collectively, the wars and the battles and the power struggles that we all get pulled into, even if we're not on the side of either of those warring factions, we're still collectively affected by that. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a natural thing. I think it's a natural breakdown in order to build back up, back to that yin and yang we were talking about earlier and the balancing. But balance isn't always equal. There can be darker times and lighter times. And so I believe we've been living in this darker time to where through that collective traumatizing, it does take then one of those traumatic experiences to be the catalyst for most people in their awakenings. We aren't as moved or as triggered by bliss, by joy, by the good stuff. We almost feel like that is our reward for doing the right things. Like, oh, we get to experience a flash of this bliss. And then we got to go back to the office, go back to the news, go back to the drudgery. And so if we can set collectively or that set point to where bliss and joy are the trigger, the joy literally of looking at a baby's face or watching a flower just, float in the sun and in the wind. And from that experience, burst into tears and have so much opening and flooding happen of that grace, of that energy of the divine coming down and through us. Then when more of us can have that experience, then collectively more will. And so it does begin here with each and every one of us, our individual selves. The responsibility lies there. What can we individually do to focus on awe and joy and wonder and bliss and peace and these positive aspects to counteract these negative aspects that will always exist. It's not like we're saying they should go away, they're wrong, they're bad. They're always going to be there. And we need them to be. But we don't have to focus our attention there. We can absolutely focus our attention on that light. And the more we do, then therefore the more light is expanded in that area, whether it's the area of our own life or our family, our community, our collective. And I hope that the more and more people, and it is a defining characteristic, I believe, of the divine human era, that the more people focusing upon that will then get to awaken, get to experience their fullness and their wholeness and their truth. And they don't have to necessarily go through the shit tunnel that so many of us have to go through, right? The dark night of the soul. It is real and it is hard. And I'm not saying there won't still be challenges to our development. That's a hallmark of the development. The development is a challenging experience. But if those challenges can be more joyful rather than heart-wrenching and horrific, because for some, their initiation can come through almost dying like it did for you. It can come through a loved one dying like it did for my friend just 2 days ago. It can come through such great loss, such human heartache that you sometimes can't recover from that. Sometimes you don't take the invitation from that moment, right? The invitation may be to shut it down, hit restart. We can't do it. We don't have the strength, or that this isn't the time for it. But all of that is, a possibility. All of it's a possibility. We get to, as conscious as we can be to the choices that we're making, guide as much of it as we can. There's going to be some things that are given to us and some things that are made by us, that we are co-creators in that sense. So as much as we can be the creator, step fully into that, and then allow the things that happen to be great teachers and to question it and go, why? Why is this happening? Not, woe is me, why is this happening to me?
Why is this happening
Why
to me?
me? But say, why? Why me? With curiosity and with joy and with grace. That's us being master of our frequency. And we get to be masters of our frequency through choice and look at that heartache, heartbreak, that trauma through a joyful lens. It doesn't mean that that thing was joyful, but we can explore it with joy. And that completely changes the outcome, I believe.
I love that. Choice. I think that emerges in a whole new way for us as individuals and as a collective. That increased capacity to choose. And I also, what was coming up for me while you were talking, so many beautiful points made, is that this divine human era it's an invitation to more creativity, to being co-creators like you're talking about, and to imagine and vision new ways that apply in this space and time, that are inspired by echoes of across space and time, from the future, from the past, and bringing that all into the now in a way that's inspiring. And I think, in a lot of the conversations that I hear, there's certainly a feeling of apathy, of hopelessness. And, I think this time, it's an invitation, like you were saying before, it's an invitation to step into something new. And the unknown is always daunting because it's the unknown. You can't predict it. And our human minds love to predict the future. So I've been thinking a lot about that lately, of like, what choices could we make instead of focusing on what choices we've made? And that's important too and has its place in time. But what choices could we make with where things are at now in our individual lives and as a collective? And what are some new choices that could emerge from a new relationship with the self on all these levels? It's very exciting. You've gotten me really jazzed for this. I like the divine human era term. It's really great. But as we close here, I ask all of our guests a few questions. This is our lightning round. So the first question is, what is one belief that you've had that you no longer have?
that I'm not enough.
Love that. And what is consciousness in your perspective?
Awareness of the wholeness of life.
And what is source, God, or oneness to you?
Home.
Beautiful. And what if we're 100 years in the future on planet Earth? What do you hope for humanity?
That we are living in a time and in a space with one another of where our true nature is being expressed. We're in this incredible time right now where we are neophytes in exploring what that true nature really is. This exploration time will be very telling for what comes in 100 years if we, and enough of us, explore this to its depth. Then we'll get to experience what I see as a return to being able to communicate through our hearts and through love, to be able to be in the frequency of God, source, consciousness, as a reflection of ourselves. We will truly be at one. We can experience oneness now, but if you are experiencing something, it's still outside of you, right? It's still not you. And so getting to a point of where the oneness that we are is where we operate from. And I love this earth plane. I love it here. I think it's incredibly beautiful. I think it's uniquely challenging. It is such a fun and wild ride here. And I've had some horrible times here too. Do not get me wrong. For those listening who are like, oh, she must have had a really nice life. Hell no. Like there's been some horrific things that have gone down. But by being able to experience the fullness of life through them, that's what I mean about being in this as a playground and as a true school, and go, this is fun, this is interesting, this is wild. And I still want that wildness to be here, because I do believe that if we do get to a point of complete oneness with Source, we've just become light beings again. We don't need this body. We don't need this earth and this planet. So you said specifically 100 years, but here on Earth, I believe we'll be operating in this place of where we get to experience the full joy of this place, rather than, so probably the balance will be more light than dark, whereas now maybe we're experiencing more dark, maybe not the darkest of times for humanity, but dark times that are overshadowing the light. I feel like 100 years we're going to be more, tip the scales into the light and get to experience what that feels like. And then it'll go back and it's going to swing the other way too. And that's all part of it.
Yeah. Different experiences spiraling around.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that answer. And how can people find you if they want to connect with you?
They can go to CorissaSaintLaurent.com. Everything is there. My podcast is called The Everyday Mystic, but you can also connect to it through that website, through the podcast link. And I'll look forward to connecting with you all.
Beautiful. Thank you, Corissa. This was a lovely conversation. Always love chatting with you. I think we covered a lot of different topics. There's so many great nuggets in there. So if you're listening, you might want to listen back and hear this one again. And thank you all, light beings, for traveling with us, for exploring these aspects of self and your life and this relationship with Source. We'll see you next time. Thank you for journeying with us today, light being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we want to invite you to explore the SoulPod app, where you can immerse yourself in daily lessons, guided meditations, and breath work to develop a soul nourishing daily ritual and tune back into your own inner guidance system. You can download SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today and awaken the ancient wisdom within you.